Connie Ryan. Okay, the chair recognizes Connie Ryan.
Thank you, Senator, and thank you to all three of you. Appreciate the opportunity to speak. I had the opportunity a couple of years ago to write a letter for faith leaders, and
I'm sorry to interrupt, but when you're speaking, if you are representing a group, would you let us know? It's fine if you're just representing yourself, but if you do represent a group, please let us know that too.
my apologies. My apologies. I'm out of the habit of doing that since this is the first subcommittee this year. So my apologies. Connie Ryan, Interfaith Alliance of Iowa Action Fund, and I'm the executive director and lobbyist for the organization. In 2018, we had 170 faith leaders come together as one voice to speak against the death penalty. I spoke and gave those comments to the House at that time. And in 2019, I read part of that statement to you all on a death penalty bill, Senate File 296. And I want to read in part that statement. For many reasons, based on the spectrum of our faiths and religious traditions we represent, as well as the clear societal concerns surrounding the implementation of the death penalty, we fervently oppose the death penalty and ask you as elected officials to oppose it as well. We come with heavy hearts because our beloved Iowa is considering legislation we know to be wrong, immoral, and contrary to the facts that have become so apparent across the nation. The data and facts are clear. The implementation of the death penalty is influenced by the racial undertones of our nation's history. African-American men are adversely and disproportionately impacted. They are more likely to be given the death penalty upon conviction, especially if the victim is white. This alone is argument enough against the death penalty, but we have additional concerns. Concerns such as innocent people being sentenced to death. We understand that the death penalty is not a deterrent to crime, and the cost of implementing the death penalty is too high a price to pay in terms of our scarce public dollars. Senators, I ask you to listen to common sense Iowans, to people of faith and no faith. In the comment section of this bill, there are more than 100 posts from Iowans. And the last time I looked just minutes ago, not one supports the death penalty or this bill. There is not one organization registered for codifying the death penalty or supporting this bill. There is so much to do that we can come together and do work together. Relief for Iowans who are impacted by COVID-19, relief for Iowans impacted by the derecho, relief for parents and healthcare workers, teachers, restaurant servers, small businesses, relief for Iowa schools. Please set aside Senate Study Bill 1004 and vote no, and let's move on to critical issues impacting everyday Iowans. Let's do some good work together rather than sow division. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And who is next? Bobby Joe? Pardon? Would you raise your hand if you want to speak? It looks like Bobby Joe is trying to be heard. Can you turn her mic on? There we are.
Can you hear me now?
There we go.
Okay.
Thank you.
I couldn't talk until you unmuted me also.
Yeah.
I am with the Iowa United Methodist advocacy team. And I just want to say that everything that Connie Ryan just said, we absolutely support the Interfaith Alliance. And we have so many things that we need to take care of, that this needs to be defeated right now, and not even talked about again. We have hungry Iowans that I think need to be taken care of first. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. And who is next? Who would like to speak? Raise your hand if you would like to speak.
Republicans are the worst thing in the world. They're traitors. They're all traitors. Republicans are traitors. Biden 2020, Cavil 2024.
Okay, let's move on. All right, who would like to be next? Okay, Robert Brammer. Yes, go ahead.
Sorry, I was on mute.
There we go. Thank you.
Thanks for the opportunity to speak. I'm with Catholic Peace Ministry, which is, for the reasons Connie mentioned, dead set against the death penalty. We would add to all the policy reasons she mentioned that the death penalty implementation makes mistakes. And of course, they can't reverse them. Most of all, besides all the policy reasons, like it's overly costly, it's not a deterrent, is that, and the state makes mistakes, but it's just plain wrong. Thank you.
Thank you. And who is next? Tom Chapman? Tom Chapman?
Thank you. My name's Tom Chapman. I'm the executive director of the Iowa Catholic Conference, which is the public policy group for the Catholic bishops in Iowa. And we're registered in opposition to the bill. I think there's a lot of good secular reasons which you will hear today, but I wanted to bring our particular Catholic religious perspective. We certainly agree it's a duty of the state to punish offenders and defend the common good. But we don't believe it's necessary to take further life to accomplish that goal. We know there's a special need to offer sympathy and support for the victims of violent crime and their families, and we do that through our churches. But from our religious perspective, every person is created in the image and likeness of God. Even those who have committed great harm retain their human dignity and their capacity to reform, to love, and to be loved. So we believe that state-sanctioned killing in this case does not deter or end violence, but instead perhaps perpetuates a cycle of violence. And so that's why we're opposed to the bill. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. The raise your hand part,
Okay, I see.
there's a feature where you actually are raising your hand on the computer. We are up to 3 now. Oh, there we
Okay,
go.
I saw a lady, but she's gone off the screen now.
Over there on the right, you can see the hands that are up. I see that. Yeah.
Okay, I'm not.
Okay.
Can I go by what we see on the pictures on the screen there? All right, Jacob Hall is, no?
He's not raising his hand.
Oh, okay, Loxi Hopkins, I'm sorry, yes, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Loxi Hopkins. I'm from Davenport, Iowa. I am a member of, I'm a board member of numerous organizations. I am a Catholic, and I live my faith through the social justice work that I do. I'm really concerned that Iowa is even considering starting down this slippery slope. I understand that you're talking about the death penalty for just one instance, but we have to all know that it won't stop here, that it will continue down that slippery slope. I'm thinking of the execution of the woman in Indiana last night, and as a mother, I'm horrified of the crime that this woman committed. But at the same time, she was a victim of abuse, terrible sexual abuse, terrible physical abuse, to the point that she had brain damage. She was mentally ill, but we didn't halt execution for any of those reasons. And I think that we have to consider what drives people to this. The death penalty is not a deterrent to anything. No one that commits a crime stops to think, oh, will the death penalty be there or not? They just plain don't. There's reasons why people commit crimes, and they're horrendous reasons. But my faith tells me that we can't possibly consider intentionally killing another person, or we just can't. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you very
Thank you,
much. Okay, who is? Okay. Leslie Carpenter?
Thank you. It's very nice to see you, Senator Garrett, Senator Schultz, and Senator Bisagno. My name is Leslie Carpenter, and I represent Iowa Mental Health Advocacy. I raised the concern in that just 2 days ago in the evening, a woman that was mentally ill, I believe was the same woman that Loxi was speaking of, was executed by the federal government. And she was executed even though the laws stated that she should not be. She should not have been convicted. She should not have been a victim of being killed by the government. But even though those protections were written into the law, she still was. Now, I am the mother of an adult son who has a very serious mental illness, a schizoaffective disorder. And when he is off his medications and the illness is out of control, his voices, the voices of the illness, tell him horrible things. They tell him to take out all the people on our planet who don't have angel wings with a tsunami. They tell him to dig out his own eyes. They tell him to kill his mom. These people sometimes have things happen when we cannot get them admitted. And here we are in the state of Iowa, ranked 51st in the country for the number of our state beds to take care of people with mental illnesses. People cannot always get admitted when they are in psychosis. And we require them to be dangerous to themselves or others before we will even admit them, if we could even find a bed. It is my lifelong nightmare now that it will come to be someday that our son is not in appropriate hospital care when he's in a psychosis. And if, God forbid, he should hurt himself or someone else, I don't want him to be subject to the death penalty. Not to mention, for like all the other reasons that people are going to mention and have mentioned, it doesn't work to deter crime. It is not cost effective. We have so many more urgent needs for our fiscal resources here in the state of Iowa. I am asking you, I am pleading with you to please not push this through the subcommittee. It is something that is not helpful to any human being in our state. And none of us, including the state, should have the right to take another life. Thank you for considering our point of view.
Thank you. Okay. Nathan Blake? Go ahead.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you, Senators. My name is Nathan Blake. I'm here on behalf of the Iowa Department of Justice and Attorney General Tom Miller. We are registered opposed to this legislation. Attorney General Miller has been opposed to the death penalty his entire time in office. And I think lots of people, you've heard a lot of good reasons why this bill does not make sense. I'd just like to concentrate on 4 quick items. Number one of the things that you've heard already, but is essential as we consider our justice system and its purpose, is that the death penalty is not a deterrent to crime. And it's been proven that way in many, many studies. The death penalty is a huge burden on the judicial system. It's a burden on the prosecutors and appellate attorneys who have to deal with it. It's an additional burden on the judicial system itself. and those resources can be better spent elsewhere. One of the things that I think distinguishes perhaps Iowa in its approach to criminal punishment, as opposed to some other states who may or may not have the death penalty, but we do have life without possibility of parole, which is effectively a death sentence for Iowans who receive that sentence. And the alternative of implementing a death penalty is extraordinarily costly to the extent that you adhere to the Iowa and federal constitutions with respect to the due process rights of people and what they need. So for those reasons, especially given the fact that it is not a deterrent, our office continues to oppose measures that would re-implement the death penalty in Iowa. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Patti McKee.
Thank you, Senators, for allowing me to speak. I am speaking as a victim of violent crime. I have had someone's hands around my neck, squeezing my life's breath out of me. And this, had I died, it would have been to cover up another crime. And I stand here opposed to the death penalty. Taking a life for a life doesn't get us anywhere except a more violent society. And it makes the government complicit in crime and in killing. And I agree with, I think, what pretty much everybody else has said, all the other reasons why it does not make any sense. But as a victim of a violent crime, I don't want the state perpetrating violence in my name or using my tax dollars for it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Sue McTaggart.
Hello, am I able to be heard? Sorry.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
My name is Sue McTaggart. I'm from Dubuque County. I am a secretary of the NAACP chapter here, and I am the chair of the Criminal Justice Committee. And I would just state what the NAACP's policies are, or their position is with regard to the death penalty, which is that it is enacted with racial disparity. That although Black people make up 13% of the population, they make up 42% of death row and 35% of those who are executed. I would reiterate what others have said, which is innocent people have been convicted and executed. It consumes an enormous amount of resources, and there's no evidence that it improves public safety. And in the world, the death penalty is becoming less popular. We would be taking a step backwards in terms of human rights. So for those reasons, and also because Iowa has many problems right now economically and with COVID, we don't need to be directing resources towards setting up a death penalty. So for those reasons, I would urge you to drop this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Over here.
Yeah.
Brian Carter. Yes, sorry.
Thank you, Senator Garrett, and the other senators
There we go.
for allowing me to speak for today. I am a part of the United Methodist advocacy team, and so I am speaking on their behalf, but I also speaking because I have more personal experience with the scope of this particular bill. I served as a pastor of the Trinity United Methodist Church in Des Moines from 1982 to 1991. And during that time, we had the Barnes family move to our neighborhood and become active in our church. And they had a 9-year-old daughter who is also very active in our Sunday school. Well, one night after we had a church meeting in which they were attendant, they called me up and said that their daughter had disappeared. And they wanted help in trying to find out what happened to her. And so I and other members of the church went out and searched the neighborhood and tried to think of places that she may have gone, what had happened to her. But it turned out that she was kidnapped, she was sexually molested, and then she was thrown out of a car in Altoona that led to her death. So coincidentally, this kind of refers directly to the scope of this particular bill. Yeah. We spent months consoling, counseling with this family, their anger and their disappointment and their, it was very, very difficult time. And after they caught the man responsible for the crimes, we continued to be with them, and he was sentenced to prison without parole. But some years later, I had moved to another church, and this family had moved to Kansas City, and they called me out of the blue to tell me the thanks for the support that we in the church had given them, and to say that they were active in another church at that time and found in their hearts to forgive the man who had killed their daughter. They just felt such peace finally after several years, and were glad that they were able to do that while he was still living. Then some years later, I didn't minister here a long time. We did hear that he had died in prison, just of natural causes. We all felt this is a better outcome than seeing him put to death. It gave the family time and opportunity to heal and to forgive. They felt more at peace with it. The offender had time to consider what he had done and make his peace with this God, because we also believe in the grace of God and the redemption of people from all acts of sin, even capital murder. And he remained removed from society so he could not offend again. That is not true. Death penalty doesn't change that, except it does doesn't give the family a chance to make peace with him, and it doesn't give him the chance to see and understand and forgiveness. The death penalty doesn't allow us as a state to make mistakes and then correct it because the person is already dead. Taking of a life by the state cheapens the value of life. I urge you to defeat this current attempt to cheapen life and which moves us toward revenge and violence as a state-sanctioned action, instead of reforming and restoration of life and relationship. I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay, Karen Pearson.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Senator Garrett and distinguished senators. I'm here to speak against this bill as an individual. I particularly wanted to add on to some of the comments by Nathan Blake and talk about the fiscal impact of the capital punishment in the state of Iowa. It is very costly, and a 2016 Nebraska study titled "The Economic Impact of the Death Penalty on the State of Nebraska" found that the death penalty cost states with capital punishment an average of $23.2 million more per year than alternative sentencing. And if we have $23 million to waste on the death penalty, I can think of a lot of schools who would be happy to get that money to provide extra services during COVID. I can think of a lot of reentry programs for people trying to not recidivate after leaving prison. I can think of a lot of mental health needs in our communities and just many, many more resources to use that 23 extra $1 million. Please do not support this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Sharon Wagner. Sharon, are you here?
Maybe not.
Give us a second here.
Hi there, I think I'm unmuted now.
Yay.
Okay. Yes, thank you.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Sharon Wagner. I'm an attorney here in Iowa. I'm here in my individual capacity. Relevant to this conversation today, while I was in law school, I took an internship in California with the California Appellate Project, representing death row inmates. I worked on appellate and habeas corpus cases and traveled to San Quentin's death row to work with inmates. I agree with what everyone else here has said today in terms of the morality being wrong. The risk of getting a case incorrect is too high. There are so many things that go into a death penalty case, and frankly, I think what I believe is speak most important to you gentlemen today is that the cost, the literal dollars are too high. You're going to have lawyers that will need to represent clients for a significantly longer period in terms of both through the state as well as then through a defendant's legally mandated habeas cases through the federal courts. We're already seeing a delay in our judiciary in terms of cases, especially after COVID. I do civil litigation, and I haven't had a trial for a year at this point. The number of appeals will clog up our court system further. And the amount of security that is needed for death row inmates is significantly higher than the regular population. And me as a taxpaying member of the state, that cost is too high. I would ask that if we are genuinely interested in stopping violent crime, which is a laudable goal, that money should be used to increase our mental health spending in this state. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Laura Hessburg.
Wow.
Hello, Senators. Thank you. This is Laura Hessburg. I'm the Public Policy Director from the Iowa Coalition Against Domestic Violence, and we urge you to not advance this bill. We are opposed to this bill. Our coalition of domestic violence represents 22 crime victim service provider agencies across Iowa, and the collective experience of the agency staff working in those agencies who dedicate their lives to supporting victims of violent crime, specifically survivors of domestic violence and sexual abuse. And I want to do a special shout out to the victims of crime that were bravely told their stories today, and thank you and apologize for your pain. We can't speak, of course, for all survivors, but the providers we represent routinely witness the pain and suffering of crime victims, as well as their stunning resilience in surviving repeated violent acts, often over the course of months and years, that are inflicted on their minds and their bodies by people they know and care about. Still, we oppose the death penalty. The government should not kill a human being as restitution or punishment, regardless of the crime. We do not condone or excuse or even defend the actions of those who murder, but we speak from experience in saying committing violence does not deter violence or end the trauma of those harmed, as has been said here. We know that because, as has been said here, some victims of gender violence are abused to the point where they commit crimes themselves, and they even harm or kill others. Again, we are not excusing or condoning that behavior, but inflicting violence to prevent violence is ineffective, it's inhumane, and does not further the ideals of justice. Iowa doesn't need the death penalty to prove that killing is wrong or to protect public safety. People convicted of murder in Iowa spend their lives in prison. Importantly, as also been noted, the price of getting it wrong is too high and happens far too often. And especially it will perpetuate the inequality in terms of disproportionately harming people of color in our states, in our nation. We urge you to reject this bill. Of course, we condemn violence, but we can't support the death penalty as an exception to the violence we seek to end. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Samuel Jones.
Hi, I'm Sam Jones. I'm the pastor at Faith Baptist Church in Hudson, Iowa here, and I'm speaking in support of this bill. We think of the history of our jurisprudence and our law. It comes mostly from Blackstonian law theory, legal theory, and Blackstone pointed out that no human law should be obeyed if it contradicts divine law or revealed law. And he states very clearly that divine law and revealed law are found in Scripture. And what does Scripture say? Well, Genesis chapter 9, verse 6, which is where we'd often find the founding of our civil government, says this: whoever sheds man's blood, by man his blood shall be shed, for in the image of God he made man. And we're not talking about, of course, putting to death those who are innocent. We're talking about those who are guilty and who have destroyed that image of God and done incredibly heinous crimes, specifically to minors, is what we're looking at here. And in the New Testament, in Romans chapter 13, it tells us that we can be unafraid of our government because they bear the sword not in vain, but they do it so righteously. This would be a righteous sense to do this, to execute capital punishment upon those who are in fact guilty of a capital crime. And that is the actual responsibility of our civil government. This bill is the least we could do to let us have real justice and not placing our perceived justice above actual objective justice that has been historically accurate and true of Western civilization. And so I speak in support of this bill. In fact, I would encourage you to take it a step further and to fully institute the death penalty for any murder, for any first-degree murder in the state of Iowa.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jaylen Cavil.
Hi, my name is Jaylen Cavil. I am the advocacy chair for the Des Moines Black Liberation Movement. I'm speaking here today to rise strongly against this bill that is being presented today. I believe that it is abhorrent and completely unjustifiable that we would even be considering a bill like this today in these times specifically and especially. The state has no power and no authority to kill its own citizens, no matter what the crime is. I don't care about the scope of this bill and how many crimes it covers. Just the fact that this is being debated, and if it were to be passed, it would open up a whole can of worms in this state that we would not get back from. And I'm especially offended by the words of Samuel Jones, who just spoke before me. I think that was abhorrent what he said and completely untrue and also racist. Speaking of that, I think that the death penalty, and I know that the death penalty is racist. We're in a state that has outrageous disparities, even worse than the national averages. We're in a state where 3% of the population is Black, but 25% of our prison population are Black Iowans. Who do you think will get killed when we institute the death penalty in this state? Who do you think will get killed? It will be Black Iowans, some of whom may be innocent. This is unconscionable. Y'all, please vote this down. Matt.
Also, I'll just like to say that since the state of Iowa began putting out the minority impact statement, there has not one time been a minority impact statement that has come back and said that the criminal justice system in this state is just it has equal or equitable disparities, and it's treating Black and brown people equally, or protecting them under the law. So until that we can get a prison system, a correction system that can treat us constitutionally, can treat us equally, why would we add more responsibility and give more power to a state that has proven again and again that they cannot handle the power and the control that they already have morally? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Jadyn Lovelady.
Hi, I'm speaking on behalf of myself and, just everybody else pretty much here who has the same opinions of me and the minority population who will be impacted majorly. I get my information and my thought processes by the fact that I am a Black woman, and also the fact that I study psychology at Creighton University with an emphasis in violence and sexual offenses. But I would like to say thank you and commend you for some of the portions of the bill that you've created today. There hasn't really been anybody that has spoken of any issues directly with any portion to the bill and any statements within the bill, which it means I commend you for your writing. However, it's the bill in the entirety that we are all coming for today, and that is the issue. I'd like to address the fact that there are about 3 things that the Department of Justice and that our systems are supposed to be addressing, or there's one thing, but there are 3 things that people like to address or believe that it does address. It is supposed to be for rehabilitation, but instead people view it for incapacitation, retribution, and deterrence. As we've already stated today, deterrence is not a factor when it comes to the death penalty. When it comes to retribution, that should not be what our system is focused on. It should be the last part, rehabilitation. We're supposed to be rehabilitating our individuals. And so I echo the point of many people who've stated that mental illness should be a factor in today's case. As a psychology student, I understand the effect of mental illness. As I've said, I work with sex offenders and I study sex offenders, and I understand that they do have a mental illness, and everybody deserves a chance to be rehabilitated. They've addressed Lisa Montgomery, who was executed even though the government says that she should not be able to. However, we cannot trust our government in some cases, unfortunately. And this has been displayed not only within the Capitol insurrection, but within the case of Lisa Montgomery, and honestly, all the time in Iowa today. I come from a family where our last name is used against us to try and put us further in into more harm, not just within the community, but within the correction system. That is unethical, that is unlawful, yet here we are today. So it is imperative that we listen to the people and we listen to the reality of what is happening in our country today, and we understand that it is unacceptable to put this bill forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Senator Celsi.
Hello, Senator Garrett and Senator Schultz. This is Senator Claire Celsi.
Hello.
Hello.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to comment in today's subcommittee. I've been listening to all the comments, and I want to thank all the Iowans who have logged on today for coming to express your opinion and your research that you've conducted. So thank you. I am here today in opposition to this bill as a senator and also as a citizen of Iowa who has done my research. We have to be really careful with the powers that we have as a state, and a power that we, potentially have is to take someone's life, which I don't think really should be a state function. Number one. Number two, the death penalty is not a deterrent to crime, and it is very costly. States like Nebraska, our next door neighbor, pay about $8 million a year just to have a death penalty system, whether or not they put anyone to death in that system. So just maintaining the entire apparatus of the death penalty in a state is very expensive. Cases cost about 2.5 times more every time a capital murder trial and death penalty take place. So they're extremely expensive. Governor Reynolds in her budget proposed about $15 million a year for the next 2 years, I believe, for mental health. So when you compare the higher costs for incarceration and murder of our own citizens to the amount of money that we're trying to invest in mental health care, I think the money would be much better invested in more mental health care, more education, especially early childhood education, which has been shown to decrease the incidence of being incarcerated later in life. Those are my comments. Thank you, senators, for allowing me to participate. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Okay, next is Christy Wolfe.
Good afternoon. I am marking next month, my family will mark the 7th anniversary of the murder of my 2 younger sisters. Susie was a teacher and Sarah was not just a psychiatrist, but a child psychiatrist, a field that's really lacking these days. They were killed in their home, murdered with gun by a neighbor who had watched their comings and goings. The case was out of Pittsburgh, and Pennsylvania does have the death penalty. I'd like to share with you the comments from my mother that represent our family's thoughts on this. And I don't think any parent should have to bury a child. I don't think any parent should have to bury 2 children, 1/4 of their offspring on a cold February day. So on behalf of my mother, 2 of our daughters were murdered almost 7 years ago in Pennsylvania, a death penalty state. We were relieved that in the penalty phase of the trial, the jury did not impose the death penalty. The murderer is in prison for life without possibility of release, and our family is not subjected to years of further headlines and court hearings. There is no justice, no closure for families in seeing the murderer of their loved ones sit on death row. The average time before execution is 25 years, and the cost to taxpayers for each case runs into the millions. We are satisfied in the case of Susie and Sarah that the state did a good job of solving the case and obtaining a just verdict of life without parole. We agree with all the arguments against the death penalty that have come before this, and we will continue, as we did a couple of years ago, coming forth to voice our disagreement with anything that creates this barbaric change to Iowa laws. Please do not make us complicit in more violence and death in the name of our loved ones who have died. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, and I remember that case. Mary's a friend of mine, and it's very tragic, very sorry for your family having to go through that. Okay, Indira Sheumaker.
Hello, my name is Indira Sheumaker. I'm a resident of Polk County, and I'm here to speak out in opposition to this bill. I think a lot of people have made a lot of really good points, and I apologize because I wasn't in early enough to hear some of the first few comments. So I'm not sure if anyone has touched on this yet, but I do want to talk about the reputation of Iowa as a state if this bill is passed. And I think that's something that we really need to consider because, as been mentioned, our justice system is inequitable at this point. Sentences are passed with a disparity and a racial bias, and an overwhelming population of our incarcerated population is Black people, and sentencing is harsher for Black people. And if this disparity exists at all, that means there is going to be a disparity in who gets sentenced to the death penalty if we have this, if this bill passes, essentially. And so I think with that in mind, and then also just thinking of who we want to be as a state, do we want to be a state that has the death penalty? Do we want to be a state that has capital punishment in this way? Because it's going to change how we are seen. It's going to change how we are looked at in the country as a whole. And I think that for Iowa, for the type of state that we have been and the type of state that we want to be, this is 100% moving backward. I think that Iowa already has a problem of losing some of our younger population. And speaking as somebody who is young in Iowa, that has been a huge consideration of mine, of leaving the state and all the people that I've grown up with. People don't want to stay here, and this isn't going to keep them wanting to stay here more. This, I think, deters people from wanting to be a part of the state of Iowa. And I think that if we want to be a state where people feel safe, if we want to be a state where people feel like we are making progress in the world, then we need to not pass this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. I might point out our time runs out at 1 o'clock. We still got time, but I want to bring that to everyone's attention that we are approaching the 1 o'clock hour. Okay, Delaney Logan.
Hello, my name is Delaney Logan, and I'm just here as an individual. I'm a student at Coe College in Cedar Rapids, and I'm majoring in social and criminal justice. So this is a bill that's really important to me. A lot of the points that I'm going to make have already been touched on. But to start on a logistical level, this is an expensive practice, and more importantly, it's a practice that's not effective, that we've already kind of touched on with that. It's also going back to the one person that has spoke with accordance to the bill. They want you to pass the bill. They said something about scripture. They read something. And I think it's important to kind of expand on that, to see the ancient scripture and the ancient times where this practice originally came from, and to understand that we're now in 2021. So if we're going based off old scripture, it kind of seems a little, crazy that we're still questioning whether or not we should have this practice, something that was suggested so long ago and has since been proven not effective. It does not provide deterrence to other offenders, and it doesn't make the families of victims feel any better. So a lot of the times people that want the death penalty will say, this gives the families some type of closure or things like that. But research has shown that's not the case. And as we just had a family of the victims speak, it really doesn't provide any more closure or happiness for families of victims to see the person sitting in jail for 25 years to get killed. It's also important to talk about the disparate effects that this will have for Black individuals in our state. And we already have a very disparate justice system in Iowa, especially with drug offenses. So it kind of makes us look even worse to be implementing another thing that's just going to further the divide, especially in our current system with the Black Lives Matter movement and things like that. It makes us look pretty poor to continually perpetuate racially disparate practices within our state. And it also can be wrong and has been wrong in the past and has killed innocent lives. So I think that's really important to take into consideration. And last point is that if we pride ourselves on being a rehabilitative system and country as a whole, then this practice simply can't be passed. If we pass this, that's basically, hypocritical, because we're talking about how we want to rehabilitate people that have mental health concerns or that have been through different things that need help, and yet we're going to kill people that have those different issues or things that they have experienced. So if we do pass this, which I urge you not to, it will be a step back for human rights. And overall, like I stated before, it's an expensive practice, and it fails to address other larger systemic issues that lead individuals to commit crime. If we're just going to focus on the end game of after people commit crime, we're going to kill them, that essentially wipes out the whole meaning of the criminal justice system, because we're not focusing on poverty or mental health concerns or anything else that's leading these individuals to commit crime. So I guess my last point is that it's very hypocritical as a state to try to end violence with perpetuating more violence. So I think you could take that in mind when you're considering this bill.
Thank you. Okay, Leslie Sand.
Hi, I am Leslie Sand. My husband Kevin and I we both are in opposition to this bill. We are from, our families go back, way back in Iowa, generations back. And we are appalled and disheartened and very saddened that this should even be considered in our home state. And all of the reasons that have been given, I won't go through those again, but I wanted to just point out that I think it was Ms. Wolfe's comments struck me, how her sisters were gunned down in a state that did have the death penalty, and it obviously was not a deterrent. And the other point that brought to my mind was, I think this money, which is, it's a terribly expensive route to go, is to instate the death penalty. Instead, we should be using it on mental illness treatment and hospitalization, and reducing the amount of gun violence. We can have reasonable gun restrictions, and that would be money much better spent. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. What was that?
I'm off video.
Our time's up.
Oh,
Some closing comments. Okay, we're fast approaching our time limit, and I do want to give the senators a little opportunity to make some comments. I'm going to exercise the chair's prerogative and lead off here, because I do want to respond to some of the things that have been stated. First of all, I want to reemphasize this bill is a very limited bill. It only applies where someone has kidnapped, raped, and murdered a minor. A lot of the comments were just about the death penalty in general, and that's okay, but I want to emphasize that this is dealing with a very limited situation. There are numerous safeguards in the bill to make sure we provide good legal representation throughout the process, and also that we are paying attention to the mental state of the defendant to make sure that the defendant understands what's going on and doesn't have a mental illness that affects their capacity. So the bill is very carefully drafted to address those particular issues. Another thing that I want to hit kind of head on, we hear all the time the death penalty does not deter, and we heard that a lot this afternoon. And there certainly are studies that say that, but there are also studies that say it does deter, and we don't hear about them nearly as much. But there are a considerable number of studies that take that position. I guess people find the studies that agrees with their position probably, but if you want to look for it a little bit, it isn't hard to find studies that take the opposite point of view. So I do want to point that out. With that, I will invite Senator Schultz and Senator Bisignano to make some additional comments. Either one can go first, wants to speak.
I guess Senator
Schultz.
Bisignano, if it's okay, I'll go ahead and start. Obviously, this is a long-term, many General Assembly issue. We've talked about this many times. I have a feeling that nobody on either side of the issue has changed their mind, either those who testified or were listening here. I am an advocate of the death penalty in appropriate situations, and I believe that this would be a very appropriate situation. I believe we will probably have a deeper conversation in committee. So I'm going to save most of my comments for there, but I do thank the people who did come online. We do have quite a pile of comments. I am going to go through that and see if there's something different that is there. My sympathies go out to the family who lost the two sisters, and any other family who lost somebody in such a horrible situation. I do listen particularly closely to somebody who has been through that system and experienced that firsthand. So my sympathies go to them. And I do listen when they say that they are glad that the person was not executed. As sitting in a position that is helping make legislation and bills for the entire state, I still hold the position that the death penalty is appropriate in some circumstances. So I'll save the rest for later.
Thank you, Senator Schultz. Senator Bisignano, do you have some comments? Senator Bisignano? There we go. Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair and Senator Schultz. Thank you for all who have participated today and in the past, because this isn't our first time. Not my first time. I dealt with it in 1994, when I was the subcommittee chair, and it failed miserably. And it comes back, and it comes back in mutated forms from time to time. I think what we're looking for from those proponents of this is to find the right recipe that somehow is going to make those of us that find it unacceptable, that we're somehow going to change. And that's not probably going to happen. Now, Senator Garrett, you and I, we serve a lot together on subcommittees and issues, especially like this. And the unfortunate part, besides the bill itself, of bringing it back again, because I listened to the governor's speech, and I heard the governor talk about justice reform. That was enlightening, that was encouraging, that was positive. Iowans were happy to hear that in light of what we went through this past year, and then in June when we came back to address some immediate issues. But the long-term need for criminal justice reform in Iowa, that's what I think the governor signaled. And I've never yet, in my time, 17 sessions, saw a death penalty push so hard by a General Assembly that isn't proposed by the governor. I mean, this sets a tone in Iowa. The death penalty isn't like passing or lowering the drinking age. It isn't all the other things that we do. To set that tone, I think should come from the top down. I think it ought to be a governor's proposal, and we should know what the governor wants in the proposal. Sure, we get to look at it and amend it and debate it, but a proposal that came out the very first week of the legislative session on the death penalty, and the time we're in at this hour, this day, this month, I really don't see the connection. I don't see the urgency. I don't see, Senator, if you came with a bill that told me if people storm the Capitol and shoot a bunch of innocent legislators, maybe you get a vote or two from the Democrats. But I don't think this equation that you've come with, because what about school shootings? What if 20 kids are shot today in a school? And we had this as a law. Would they get the death penalty? I don't think so, because there's no sex abuse involved. Might call kidnapping if they bolt the doors. And they're going to be murder and mayhem. But we're not even addressing school shootings, or even weapons in schools. So this in itself, I find untimely and unacceptable and inappropriate, and we'll have more discussions as this goes through the process. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Bisignano. Well, I'm also going to, I presume that you are not going to be signing the subcommittee sheet then, but I do intend to sign it. I support the bill. One other comment that comes to mind in listening to Senator Bisignano, I haven't heard much discussion about the victims here this afternoon. We've had a lot of talk about the killer, the person that did the killing or the accused, but I don't remember very much discussion about the victims. And it seems to me they ought to get at least as much, probably more attention from us than the people that did the killing. Senator Bisignano says, well, first week here and so on, what's the rush? Well, folks, this bill, the reason that we can do it so quickly is it's the same bill that we had in last session. So we didn't have to go out and redraft and research and so on. We did that in previous sessions, and so we had the bill available. All we did was update it and put new dates and bill numbers on it and so on. And so it was very easy to present it this way. So I also do intend, as I said, to sign the subcommittee report. We'll pass the bill on to the Judiciary Committee, and then we'll see where it goes from there. Thank you all for attending and participating, and we'll probably see you down the road.
Thank you, folks.